welcome back. We're back looking at the astrology weekly update for April for Astera Sphere Kairos, and we're going to be looking at the 16th to the 23rd this week. And I'm Sonia from Celestia Astrology, and with me I've got my good friend Shawna from Smart Astro. You can reach her at smartastro@gmail.com. She does readings by donation. And you can also find her on Substack and Blue Sky. And I'm on Blue Sky and Substack as well as Celestial Astrology. We're both available for readings. We've got our books open. Yeah, is there anything else we need to tell everybody? If you enjoy this content, please do remember to like, subscribe, comment with an emoji. We're liking the fog emoji at the moment for Neptune and Aries or smoke. Those are our favourites right now. So here is the overview of the month. So if you're tracking the whole month, you can take a screenshot and follow along with us week by week. So we're looking from the 16th. So we've pretty much completed that. We have an overlap. The 16th was Mercury entering Aries. So we covered that last week. So we'll be looking from here. Mercury will meet with Neptune as it enters Aries. Mars will be entering Leo, starting to finish off its retrograde journey. The Sun will be entering Taurus. How lovely is that? I mean, that's a nice season. Going up to the 23rd, Venus will be conjuncting the North Node in Pisces. The 21st, the Sun will be squaring Mars. Yeah, I don't think we're going to include that in this week. The 23rd, the Sun will be squaring Pluto in Aquarius. So here are the three that we're actually going to cover this week. We're going to be looking at the Mercury conjunction with Neptune in Aries. So every planet that's entering Aries at the moment is going to meet with Neptune, who's going to be slowly moving across those first few early degrees in Neptune before it retrogrades back to Pisces. When does it do that? It retrogrades back to Pisces in October. October the 22nd is when it will return to Pisces. Mars will be entering Leo on the 18th, so it'll be much more comfortable in that fire sign than it has been in Cancer. In watery Cancer, it's kind of slowed down. Mars is a warrior planet of action, and at least in a fiery Leo sign, that's also an outgoing masculine planet of action, sign of action as well. So even though it's not got essential dignity, it's still feeling more comfortable, able to take some action, but it is still retracing its steps of the retrograde. So even though it's moving direct, we've got to wait till it gets to 6 degrees before we can really feel free of everything going on there. And then the Sun enters Taurus. So this lovely fixed time of year that the domain of Venus, Sun is going to be in Venus's temple, we like to say in Hellenistic astrology. So if you imagine Venus having this temple in ancient Greece and the Sun kind of moving around and shining through that temple, lighting up all her gardens and the fountains and the statues and everything that Venus might have in that beautiful garden. It's just that time of year when everybody's planning their gardens out. You know, if you're going to spend time outdoors, are you rearranging your garden furniture and scrubbing up the barbecue and starting to make your plans for what the summer might hold. So it's that kind of time of year. And these times are all in universal time. So please adjust for your own local time zone. So how do you think this week looks, Shawna?
We touched on last week just a little bit of the Mercury-Neptune conjunction, so I think it'll be fun to kind of expand on that. Mars moving into Leo, I think some of the tears are finally going to dry up. I sit here and I think about Mars in Cancer, and I'm like, it seems to vacillate between like frustrated, steamy, and crying sadness. So I just feel like we're finally going to get a little bit of some composure back maybe out of Mars. And then, yeah, I mean, how lush is the Sun entering Taurus, right? I mean, we're going to have, where I live, we're going to have more consistency in the warmer weather. During February and March, I'm in the Midwest in the US, and it just vacillates between 70 degrees one day and 40 degrees the next, and snow the following. So it's just, it'll be nice to have some of that fixed energy once that Sun hits Taurus.
That sounds so nice. Not that mutable energy of that weather shifting, but there's so nice to get into this spring energy. So this Neptune conjunct Mercury happening on the 17th of April. And if this is sounding familiar, it's because it is. We've had 3 of these meetings because of the retrograde. So we have talked about this 3 times, and this is the last one. They met on the 2nd of March when Mercury was direct, and that was in Pisces. Then Mercury retrograded and they met on the 30th of March. And this is now the third retrograde, but this is different because they're now in Aries here at this 0 degrees of Aries, which is such a threshold point. It's the start of the zodiac. It's really like this the new moment. It's the point where the sun reaches here. It's the new start of the new year. And it feels like a new start for them. Gone over this old ground so many times before, having these meetings, retrograding back, meeting again. And now it's like, okay, Mercury's direct, still in shadow, still working stuff out for us. But it's like, let's have one final meeting. It's like that culminating meeting to sign everything off. When they've made all these plans, they've reviewed them, they've reflected them, they've been over them so many times, they know them inside out. But now they're going to finally sign everything off and make an agreement. And that's going to have to stick for a year now until they meet up again in 2026. And that will be next April. And that will also be in Aries when Neptune's moves in like for keeps. Because Neptune will retrograde back, but then it will return to Aries. This is they last met in 2024. If you discount the 3 meetings, I've got the dates of the meetings here from AstroSeek, which really helps us position it. So there was that one conjunction that they had in 2024 that was at 27 Pisces, right on Venus's exaltation degree. And then they go through all the usual sextile, square, trine, opposition, trine, square, sextile, conjunction, and then conjunction, conjunction, conjunction. So we're at a conjunction junction. So that's what we've been stuck in. And that's been the theme as for both Venus and Mercury, as they've both been retrograding backwards and forwards. And it's been at these tight degrees, those late degrees of Pisces and early degrees of Aries, that this theme has been recurring. We've been over and over these same degrees, these same areas of our life. We've been reviewing and reflecting and doing so much work on it. So yeah, we're all ready to move on from this, I think, by now. We're all ready to put this behind us and get to some fresh parts of our lives. So it's good that this is the last one, that we're all ready for that change now and ready for Mercury to get past that 9 degrees shadow point, which he will do quite quickly now that he's direct and starting to move quickly on. And then we see ourselves move into the sextile square. There's 3 trines coming up in October, November and December. So there'll be some repetition there before they meet in that conjunction, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. That's the next stage of their meeting. But for now, we can just look forward and move forward with that Aries part of our life. What do you think, Shawna? Do you want to comment on this or go back to the chart?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're going to finally stop spinning our wheels a little bit and pick up some traction, which is going to be nice. Looking ahead to those trines seems like a little sweet spot.
Yeah, that's a nice point. I mean, that's at 29 degrees Scorpio. So it's a different part of the chart. And it's meeting Neptune back in Pisces, then back at the anoretic degree where he spent so long before he moved. But at least Mercury is in a different place then, making that trine aspect.
Yeah, so we talked about this conjunction a little bit in last week's forecast too. But one of the things that I kind of hope comes from this is a little bit more mystical thinking as opposed to the overly impulsive or the deceptive possibility of speech, those kinds of things. But I really hope this can be more of a time when people feel drawn to omens and signs and feel more guided as opposed to oppressed.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like oppression could be a very tangible thing, you know, with this conjunction. But I think if we lean into the mystical and divine sense of life's movements, we'll find that relief and release and be able to see through those messages a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was speaking earlier about this sextile with Pluto that Neptune's moving into, that's coming up. And then when Uranus moves in the summer into Gemini, that will also form a sextile. It won't come into exact aspect until 2026 and beyond. But it sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, finding out what Richard Tarnas or what Archetypal Explorer had to say about it, and searching articles sort of about what might we expect coming up. So yeah, it is a turning point in optimism, bringing optimism for humanity, which I was like, good. Yes. I was like worried in case it could bring the opposite. And of course, when they come into like exactness, but even in the whole sign, they're going to be bringing this like a trine, but with also this sextile Uranus to Pluto, making that trine aspect as well. And then Jupiter moving will create like this sort of triangle rectangle thing going on as well. So they're going to be making some interesting patterns. But yeah, the trine is very significant, very long lasting. It's going to take some time for it to move apart as well once it's coming into form and separating. And the last Neptune-Pluto conjunction happened in 1891, 1892, and that was at 7 degrees of Gemini. And the next actual conjunction is not predicted to occur until the 2390s, and that will also be in Gemini. But it was interesting that like from 7 degrees Gemini to 12 degrees Gemini. So it's just that tiny bit of the zodiac that it's covered in 500 years. So that's quite crazy. But also they stay in aspect for about 80 years. So the effects that they're having on the collective is quite considerable once they
Really
once they come
very
into this.
generational.
So once we see that forming, it's going to be with us for quite some time. Looking back, they formed a waxing sextile between 1950, between Libra and Leo. But that ends in 2031. So we're part of that period between Aries and Aquarius is when it will end. And the years when it was exact was 1950 to 1955, 1976 to 1984, and then 2026 to 2031. So it just felt quite exciting that we can actually watch it starting to form now. That Neptune moving into Aries was like the beginning of, okay, we see this starting to form. We see that Uranus is going to move into Gemini. And we'll see that coming into like even tighter, like more of the puzzle coming together. And then this Uranus, Pluto, Neptune trilogy brings this empowered vision of human emancipation, is how Archetypal Explorer projects these three coming together in aspect, with a successful integration of the sacred and the profane elements in the psyche, as well as descent into the psychological underworlds, followed by rebirth into absolute consciousness. So human history leading inexorably to a point of collective awakening. So I was like, yes, okay, we'll take it.
Really exciting to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, with the difficulties that we're having, that 2026 being this turning point of pendulum swinging, and maybe they've got to swing to an extreme before things correct, and there is like this correction point. I mean, it's associated with other points in time, like the Renaissance. Like it brings in periods of time like that go down in history as adjustment points. So I mean, it can go bad if things don't look well adjusted in the charts of extremism and fanaticism and glorification of indulgence and hedonism. But when it's well aspected, you get these real exaltations of what's best about humanity. And I think, like with Pluto in a sign like Aquarius, that's really bringing that through, the potential for that.
I wonder what kind of, I think the term gets thrown around a lot, shadow work, that people can do on a personal level, that this will open up for them. We talk about healing generational trauma. That's kind of a coined phrase these days. And even if it gets a little overused, it's certainly a real thing where, something that happened to a grandfather or grandmother, inevitably gets passed down in some form or another to the generations beyond. And it's part of evolution and how we adapt. But I wonder if there's going to be this real potential for, deeper healing if we find a way to bring together a little bit more. We can draw out the unconscious and see what the mass influence does to us as individuals.
Well, we've certainly got that potential with Pluto and Aquarius, and even Neptune in Aries, sort of finding that pioneering place and being able to bring, like Neptune can find that possibility, that spiritual ideal, and finding a pioneering place for that, finding what's possible for humanity, finding those hard edges, bringing things out of the confusion, refusing the boundaries. But yeah, it would be great if there was more generally accepted ways. I mean, I don't know about you, I've tried shadow work and done a fair bit of work on myself. And I know that when you heal, even if you don't directly have descendants, children of your own, you're still healing your lineage, your ancestors behind you, and also those of your line going forward.
Yeah.
So any healing work that you do is never wasted.
It's possible to heal backwards,
yeah,
you know. Yeah.
backwards
Yeah.
and forwards.
Mhm.
So yeah, those of my family going forwards, future people that I would be an ancestor of, healing work that I've done would be carried forward into that line. There still are descendants that will be related to me, even if they're not directly of my line. Yeah, there's plenty of nephews and great nieces and nephews floating around.
Mhm.
So I'm doing it for them as well as for my ancestors.
Yeah, like you said, healing is never wasted.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard. I mean, we've been doing a book club on the nodes, and how much of that is coming up in it. What we carry from the past, and it's hard to separate that out from your own stuff sometimes. Doing that work helps. Whether it's yours or it's from the past, it doesn't really matter because you're carrying it in this lifetime, whatever.
Yeah.
So the best thing is not to get bogged down in whose is it, where does it belong to, and just get on with working with it, and living with it, and doing what you can to heal it. It doesn't always matter why it's there with you. But we can see in the chart where it's come from or what you've got.
Right.
But yeah, that went deep, didn't it?
You did.
That's
But
Mercury-Neptune for you.
yeah, I think Neptune allows you to, keep your feet on the ground while having your head in the clouds. I mean, quite literally, if Neptune brings you that fog, it's reducing that boundary and it's drawing those two worlds together, and it literally and figuratively blurs the lines.
Yeah.
So
But I always think when it does, it's doing it for a reason. And when it
definitely.
clears, things are potentially clearer. It depends on how you've navigated that fog, that surrender to it, that allowing of it, and that trusting it as well when you're there. And that's tough.
And I think we found that word surrender again.
Yeah.
Last week we brought that up a couple times. And yeah, I think we're going to have some chances to just kind of let go of the reins and step back and take a deep breath and see if you can find a way to release all of the stress and anxiety and bring yourself back to your own center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we need to do once we finish recording is to have a Shawna's week word of the week. So I think last week it was bittersweet.
This week it'll be surrender. Our lovely dear Merptune.
Mertune. That is our favourite word for it, isn't it? Mertune. It just resonates so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to take us away with Mars? Mars entering Leo. And we've got that graphic from Honeycomb as well to cover the dates.
Yeah, we might finally have Mars entering Leo and out of the water of Cancer. So, kind of feels we're still in shadow period though until 10 degrees, 6 degrees.
6 degrees.
6 degrees, okay. So we've kind of got that, almost there, but not yet. We're getting there. Still dragging feet a little bit until we get to that 6 degree mark. But Mars back in Leo gets very loud, gets bold, wants to move. It feels a little more natural back in fire. Maybe we're at the point too where it's like, I know what I want now. We've gotten through some of those other pivot points where we were kind of stuck and letting the storm surround us and going through the things. And now it feels like maybe we've gained some more trust in ourselves and our own intuition now that Mercury's starting to separate from Neptune a little, just a little. But I think it's a good time to also be careful not to overcompensate because it's like when you come out of hibernation, you haven't maybe exercised in a long time, and then all of a sudden you're like, yes, I'm gonna run a marathon, and then you get hurt. If you do that, if you overcompensate or overexert, then you're gonna feel that fatigue really quickly, and we're just kind of still stuck in the mud.
Yeah, he's kind of got to get his land legs back, hasn't he? It's like
Mhm.
a bit wobbly, still a bit seasick.
Yeah, very Little Mermaid, having made her deal with the wicked sea witch, right? She's finally got her legs, but now she can't speak.
I mean, it's lovely that they've got that trine relationship with the moon in fiery Sagittarius and then all these planets in fiery Aries. So there's like a lot of fire in this chart going on with that early, like this grand fire trine that Mars is forming. It's like whole sign to the moon, but exact to Neptune. in this. So there's quite something that's being cooked up, you could say, with fire. Like imagine a bonfire or something cooking that soup.
Yeah, it's almost, you get that early morning fog before the sun really rises. You get the light, you get the sun, you get the fire, but you don't know exactly what direction it's coming from because it's so hazy and
Yeah.
everything is just kind of lit up at the same time and with
Yeah.
the same amount of light. Still in the shadow period though, so I feel like there's a lot of possibility for maybe, blurred motivations or intentions.
We're there on April the 17th, and then it clears the shadow at 6 degrees on May the 2nd. But it's got this hurdle to get over on April the 27th, the Pluto opposition at 3 degrees before it reaches that clearing the shadow. So we've done this before. Again, we've had 3. This is the last of 3. So we've done that, been there at 29 degrees, at 1 degree, and now at 3 degrees. So it's been a clear progression as well of 3 trials, 3 reflections, 3 redos before it exits the shadow. So it really is looking back at that retrograde story, and those 3 oppositions have really punctuated it. So that Mars, that whole retrograde story had, across the 2, from starting in Leo and then going back to Cancer, has been looking at like, what do we want, like Mars being the planet of action and passion, and what do we fight for, or what are we creating in Leo maybe, and in Cancer, what do we protect? And sometimes shadow things come up, particularly when it's opposed to Pluto, and like we always, or I always advise, like, don't be afraid to look those shadows in the eye and reflect on any prompts that you're being shown, or any whispers that are coming up, anything you're being asked to purge, or any releases. Like quite often these releases can be cathartic, even just like sitting down and having a good cry, particularly with that Cancer journey, letting that go. But also these are coming up for a reason, these difficulties that we're being shown, and that's part of the retrograde story, is being asked to look at these things and being given the opportunity to release it, so we don't carry it on into when Mars goes direct into a new Mars story. Like from this retrograde time, it only happens this every 2 years. So to lose our mojo, or our get up and go, somehow has been difficult. It's been such a hard slog. I found it really hard. The motivation and just getting the work done has been hard, so much harder than normal, and things taking so much longer than normal, especially combined with the Mercury retrograde, obviously. But I'm looking forward to him going direct and getting some ease back with getting things just done, hopefully. Hopefully that's going to help get back to just what my normal level is of getting things done, and not adding any more difficulty to the difficulties that I normally have. So you've got your normal level of difficulties, and then this has added an extra level of difficulty and challenge to getting through the things that you have to get through. But that's what this time is indicating and asking of us, and it's so that we can slow down and look at what's coming up and give it the time that it's asking for. It's kind of like nature's way of a timeout, or a vacation or holiday, or whatever. The ancients wouldn't work like we do 5 days a week or whatever. There would be a retrograde, and they would honor the planets and slow down and do the thing, and do that reflection work, and allow for those setbacks and delays, to because they wouldn't be pushing as hard as, but we're trying to keep pushing at our normal level while these planets are retrograde, and that's not natural and normal. It's hard for us to keep trying to do that. So we've made it more difficult for ourselves, really, by trying to keep our normal level of work done. And in future, if that happens, and there's 3 planets, like personal planets that are close to us, going retrograde at the same time, I think I'm booking a sabbatical. So I'm giving notice. That's what I think needs to happen. I'm not going to try and work as normal, having had the experience of this time. That's certainly one of the things I think I've learned. that's come up for me. But we've all had our own experience, depending on where Leo and Cancer falls in your chart, and the kind of topics that may have come up. So do take this time, especially as it shifts, to notice, is it shifting from the Cancer topics in your chart to a final tying up of those Leo topics in your chart as well? And do you notice that shift? And also just that final Mars-Pluto opposition as well. Those principles of intense willpower, courage, drive, passion, determined efforts towards renewal and regeneration, like that push to finish something and to have that catharsis, and that urge to push too hard. It's like this intense death and rebirth struggle. Like if you think of a caterpillar and the butterfly struggling to be reborn, and that violent push to emerge, or even a chick coming out of an egg that it's really got to crack through that shell, and the intensity of effort needed to get that last push. And it's kind of like that, but you don't want to push too hard or break, injure itself. But that's what the push too hard can be. And it's like getting that level of action just right. And it's hard to time that in the retrograde time, because Pluto's pushing you to go hard. Mars is retrograde and not quite sure that it's at its right level of energy. But that's what we're being pushed through. It's kind of primal, that energy that we're tapping into right now. This pushes that death rebirth cycle to continue. Without it, a baby wouldn't ever travel down that birth canal. It would stay put where it's snug and warm and comfy and cozy. Why would it want to travel through that difficult, often that's the most dangerous part of its life, is that birth canal journey and that emergence into the world. And that first breath is the most critical time, and that impetus to just be born that we share with all the animals is that really primal thing, and that urge that, yes, it doesn't make sense, but we do it anyway. So I think that's what's coming up for me anyway.
It's funny. The notes at the top of my list here are recognize when you're pushing too hard. Pluto's opposition can really bring that strong resistance. And it's a beautiful analogy you just used. It is the most dangerous and yet the most rewarding, right? I mean, because if you continue to stay put where you are, you'll do one of two things. You won't continue to grow, which stunts you and ultimately will be the end, or you'll continue to grow and you outgrow your home, you outgrow your existing, space. And in order to move beyond that, you have to pass through that door, right? You have to acknowledge it and admit it and go through it. And I think this Mars Pluto opposition can also add in an opportunity to check your ego versus what kind of real influence you can have. So I think it's definitely an opportunity to maybe use that creative vision that you've come into contact with the Mercury-Neptune, and use it to redirect power as opposed to using it as brute force.
That makes a lot of sense. I see this like affecting the fixed signs this time. Like as Mars moves into Leo, it's activating those fixed signs. So we've got Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, and Taurus. So by whole sign, this Uranus as well. We've got Venus touching it by degree. Okay, Mars in Leo. And then before we leave, we've got the Sun entering Taurus, a nice way to round out the week. So here we go. The Sun is leaving its point of exaltation. So in a way, for the Sun, it's a fall in dignity. And yet for us, it feels like a lovely time, because the Sun is entering this fixed place. So we know where we're at with a fixed sign. Things are stable. They're not so changeable. It's not so dynamic as this Aries energy that's pushing us towards something. Here, it's like, okay, go out in the garden, sit and relax. Here's your nice cool drink. Here's your sun umbrella or your lotion or whatever you need. And now you just relax and enjoy it. You're in this feminine energy. It's introspective. So it's reflective and caring and nurturing. So it's thoughtful and reflecting on what it's taking in. So you've kind of got the dualities, and the yang energy is all about the one, and feminine energy is about two, the duality of both. So it has that nature, that dual nature, like the yin and the yang, when you see the two, the black and the white, but each have the color of the other. But it reminds us that duality is needed, that it can't be all yang. We need that duality. So it's co-present with Uranus now. The Sun is going to be traveling towards that Uranus. So it is stirring up that activation of Uranus. Uranus is still in that sextile with Venus. And Venus, of course, is the ruler of Taurus. And she can see it by sextile. And the Moon is the exaltation ruler. We've got the Moon over here in Capricorn. Yeah, that's a nice Earth trine there. from Capricorn. So that's quite a nice place to have both the luminaries present, contributing. We like to see that for an ingress chart. You have got that square with Mars. So that Mars in Leo is also reflecting back to the sun. It's in the sun's sign, so it's answering to the sun in that respect. It's in the sun's temple. So the sun is providing to Mars. The sun is in a superior position to Mars. So I think the fact that it's square isn't something I'm unduly concerned about. It's not going to spoil the Taurus party going on here. But maybe it's going to bring some action, some nice men for the party. Maybe I'm getting a bit carried away with the fantasy.
It feels a lot like, no, that's perfect. It feels a lot like you've got a nice warm spring day. You've got maybe your favorite cardigan, right? You've got maybe your cup of coffee if it's in the morning and it's still cool, and you've got your favorite book. Maybe it's a book you're just getting excited about, or, something, but it feels very cozy and comfortable. And even though the sun is not in its best position here, it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna nestle in and take my time. And, Venus is very sensual and all about tangible, physical, feeling things. And, it wants the beauty and it wants the pleasure and the sweetness and the slowness, and maybe we indulge a little bit more, and maybe that's where that detriment comes from, in a sense. But, it brings about all that cozy, comfortable. I don't have an appointment to get to. I don't have to be somewhere. I can turn my phone ringer down. It's just like, it's just me and whatever I want to do for right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only shadow on the party is this Pluto.
That Pluto.
Yeah, because him and Mars are like, they're not in that opposition yet, but it forms this T square with the sun sort of at the difficult point of it. So that's the only shadow. And the sun is, you could say that the sun is throwing light on that opposition between the sun and Pluto. So the sun is illuminating whatever Mars and Pluto are going to bring up. The sun is going to illuminate it for us and make it, if you've struggled to see it before in the other two oppositions, the sun is going to make it that much clearer. Could be like the point of difficulty in Taurus there for it. But yeah, there's always a shadow in the garden. You want a bit of shade.
Always. Yeah, you don't get the fruitful plants if you don't have the icky mud.
Yeah, that's it. You need, and Pluto is that rich earth, isn't it? That even that manure in the earth that allows, that's so rich for the plants to grow from.
Stinky, nourishing, yucky mud, thick, still moist, still, even though it's earth, it's damp and it's, moldable in that sense. I know Taurus is fixed, but Taurus is sustaining, and if we don't have that fixed light, that sustaining light, we don't get that growth.
Yeah. And Taurus is very much about the planning and the cultivation, the story of these three decans as we move through Taurus. And this first one is all about the planning, and then the sustaining, and then the surrendering again in the last decan, like surrendering to the forces of nature and everything. You've done your planning and now just plant those crops and let them grow. But the first decan is like dividing your fields, and how are you going to plan out those fields? Which one is going to go fallow this year? And how are you going to plan out that garden? So enjoy your Taurus season. It is where the moon is in exaltation. I think that's why it always feels like such a nice place, because the moon being that planet that's closest to us, where the moon's happy, I think we all feel a little bit happier. So when the moon comes to meet the sun and we get those Taurus lunations, those are always a nice time as well. So that closes out our week. Thank you so much for joining us. If you've enjoyed it, please do remember to like, subscribe, comment, give us an emoji. If you've been feeling the fog, share a foggy emoji, or surrender, a shrug. We'll take it. So thank you so much. Next week, we'll be back looking at the 23rd to the 30th of April. And thank you so much for Shawna for joining me. And you can find Shawna, you can write to her. She's doing readings. Write to her at smartastro@gmail.com. She's doing readings by donation, and she's really fantastic as a reader. So don't miss the opportunity. And you can find her on Substack and Blue Sky as well. And you can find me there as celestialastrology.com. And I've also got my books open for readings. So thank you so much for joining us.